Have you ever wondered what it would take for a king to murder his own father and then build a fortress in the sky just to escape what he'd done? In the middle of the Sri Lankan jungle, there's a slab of rock that rises 200 meters straight into the air, and on top of it sits a palace that one guilty man built almost overnight. Have you ever seen a mirror that ancient tourists scratched their names into over 1,000 years ago? What would drive someone to carve a throne out of solid stone at the very top of the world just to feel safe? Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why this rock is still called one of the most haunting monuments to human guilt ever built. In the central plains of Sri Lanka, jungle stretches flat and green for miles in every direction, and then, without warning, the earth just stops being flat. A single column of stone, the frozen remains of an extinct volcano, punches straight up out of the trees. Locals call it Sigiriya, the Lion Rock. Stand at its base today and you'll feel dwarfed, the way you might standing beneath a skyscraper. Except this one was carved and climbed by hand 1,500 years ago, long before any king ever laid eyes on it. Buddhist monks had already found this rock and called it holy, using its caves as a quiet mountain monastery. But that peaceful chapter was only the beginning. What happened next would turn this rock into something far stranger than a monastery, a monument built entirely out of fear. Long before the fortress, Sigiriya was simply a peaceful retreat. In the centuries before the 5th century, Buddhist monks climbed into its natural caves and crevices, living in quiet meditation above the world, using the rock's caverns as their monastery. For generations, that's all Sigiriya was, a sacred, sleepy place, tucked away in the jungle, known only to the faithful. That would have remained its whole story if not for one man's ambition. In the year 477, a prince named Kashyapa seized the throne of Sri Lanka from his own father, King Dhatusena, forcing his brother Moggallana to flee into exile. According to the ancient chronicles, the guilt and the fear of his brother's revenge never left him. So Kashyapa did something no king before him had ever done. He moved the entire capital of his kingdom to the top of this rock. Over the next 18 years, he transformed Sigiriya into a fortress palace unlike anything Sri Lanka had seen, ringed by a double moat that was reportedly stocked with crocodiles, guarded by a giant carved lion whose massive stone paws still flank the entrance today, though the head crumbled away centuries ago. At the very summit, he had an audience hall and throne carved directly out of the living rock. He surrounded himself with lush gardens, gravity-fed fountains that still bubble to life today whenever it rains, and dazzling frescoes of celestial figures painted across a sheer rock face, a private paradise, perched somewhere between heaven and the guilt he was running from. But honestly, that's not even the most remarkable part of this story. In 495, Moggallana finally returned with an army. The two brothers' forces met on the plain below the rock, and what happened next is almost too ironic to believe. As the battle turned, Kashyapa's own elephant swerved to avoid a patch of swampy ground. His soldiers, watching from a distance, mistook the movement for retreat and broke ranks. Abandoned by his own army, Kashyapa ended his life on the battlefield. Now, here's where things take a turn nobody saw coming. Moggallana didn't keep the mountain palace for himself. He moved the capital back to Anuradhapura and handed Sigiriya back to the monks, turning the guilty king's fortress back into a quiet monastery. For centuries afterward, monks lived there once more, and pilgrims and visitors passing through would scratch poems and graffiti into a long, polished wall near the frescoes, a wall so smooth it was once called the mirror wall. Some of that graffiti dating back over 1,000 years, is still legible today. But eventually, sometime around the 14th century, even the monks left, and the jungle did what jungles do, simply grew over everything, swallowing the rock story whole for nearly 500 years. Here's the thing though, the place itself wasn't done surprising people. In 1831, a British army officer named Jonathan Forbes was out on a hunting trip when he stumbled across the ruins rising out of the trees. What he found waiting for him at the top stunned even seasoned explorers. Intact frescoes, the crumbling lion's paws, the thrones still carved into the rock, and a mirror wall covered in the handwriting of forgotten centuries. Of the roughly 500 frescoes historians believe once decorated the rock face, only 21 survive today, delicate paintings, likely depicting celestial maidens, that somehow weathered the better part of 2 millennia in the open air. Today, Sigiriya is Sri Lanka's most visited cultural site, carefully managed by the country's Central Cultural Fund. The surviving frescoes are so fragile that flash photography is strictly forbidden, and conservationists work constantly to protect them from weather and wear. In 2023, the ancient chronicle that records this entire saga, the Mahavamsa, was even added to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, cementing its place as one of history's great written records. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more videos.